Hello, my name is Jennifer Ferreira and welcome to another Grande Entrevista. The decision took Toronto by surprise, rearranging the city's ward boundaries and cutting the number of councillors in half, all just 2 months before elections. But it isn't just city councillors that are scrambling to make sense of these changes, it's trustees too. School boards were given until August 14th to realign their wards to match the new model. Trustees have since submitted their proposal, while the necessary legislation has officially passed in Queen's Park. Here to speak more about this is Toronto Catholic District School Board Trustee Frank D'Amico. Thank you so much for joining us today, Frank.
Thank you for having me, Jennifer.
If we could start at the beginning, I'd like to know what your initial thoughts were when you first heard about the news that the amount of Toronto City Councillors was going to be cut essentially in half.
You know, it's both good and bad. It's probably good because it might save some money. However, I know some of the councillors. I've worked with a lot of them in the past, and now some of them are going to be battling head to head with each other. Won't mention any names, but there are a lot, especially in my area. I've worked with several of them, and it's going to be sad to see some of them if they leave, you know, because they do so much in their community. So we have to see what's going to happen after the election, if they're still going to be involved somehow in the local communities.
And so as a result of these changes at City Council, Toronto school boards are also being forced to rearrange their trustee wards. Is this something that you expected to happen as a result of what the city would have to do in terms of rearranging its boundaries?
I knew it was going to come to that eventually. It's just the way the boundaries were set up. Originally, I would have had half of one riding, York Southwestern, and half of Davenport. And the reason being is because there was 2 councillors in each of those boundaries. I don't know about the other boundaries. Some ridings, federal and provincial, would have 3 or 4 councillors with a little part in it, so it's very confusing. So what they decided to do was, put the wards to match the ridings, and that kind of mathematically it wasn't good, because in one new ward, which is also a riding, now you're going to have a different amount of schools as the next trustee ward or riding. So some trustees are going to have more schools than others. Some might not have any high schools.
So talk to me a bit about how the Toronto Catholic District School Board divided its boundaries prior to these changes. Was it based on equal representation in terms of the number of voters?
It still went by councillors, so we had to adjust it to see how the council was going to be set up, whether they would have had 44, 47. Right. There was a bunch of options, but we had to wait for City Council to approve theirs first.
Right.
We were ahead of the game. Our staff was, bringing it forward, all these options. But at the end of the day, we couldn't do anything until the city brought forward their options, and then we had to work with that. So my boundary, I lost a little bit, but gained some back. Because right. when the city made their decision, which was the new City of Toronto boundaries,
the 47
wards.
Right.
I had lost a large part of an area that I grew up in, mm-hmm.
But
I gained another part of an area that I also grew up in. So, I had mixed feelings about that.
Right. And so I believe the rule in terms of how the school board distributes the different wards is it's allowed to give trustees wards, but it can't split them up. Is that how it works?
The reason they won't split them up is because when you go and vote in a municipal election, they're going to give you one ballot. And on that ballot, it will have a ballot for mayor, a city councillor, and a trustee.
Right.
So depending on whether you're a Catholic supporter, public supporter, or French public or Catholic supporter, they have 4 separate ballots. Mm-hmm. You let them know which one you are, where you support, and if they have the wrong, like for instance, they would give me a public school ballot, and I would have to tell them, no,
It's Catholic.
I'm the candidate, so why,
Right.
I need to be voting. So
Right,
sometimes it's not marked down properly, and they can make the corrections at that time.
Okay. And so when it comes to that 47 ward model that had been presented to the school board, and the school board then having to make its decisions in terms of how it was going to distribute its wards, again, going back to my question, was that decision based on an equal number of voters within each ward? Is that how the school board decided to distribute?
Yes, so proportionally it's the most equal. What they did was they had different criterias. I'm not the mathematic person that they are, but they crunched all the numbers in, and all the different criterias that they like both my wards. I have a little part of Weston and a little part of Davenport, and those are the two probably largest populated wards in the area. Had like over 50,000 voters in one. So if they would give me those two wards, two ridings, I would have over 100,000 voters
Right.
easily. So it was difficult to mix Davenport, where I'm from. They had a list of all the different criterias for each option, and in each option they would have what I forgot the exact name that they called it, but if those sections were green, it was okay. The more green those sections were,
The better.
then it was okay. And then they would have some sections that were red, and red means that it was very unproportionate. So the first three options, I believe, had a lot of red spots in them, and
Right.
they said, you know what, we tried doing it this way. I guess they wanted to do it by schools, like by giving everybody equal amount of schools. Couldn't do it. Another thing they tried was putting, like, not to change the boundaries too much, because all the communities are used to certain boundaries. So, and sometimes what some people even wanted to do was have a boundary where you have a ward that's in South Scarborough and in North Scarborough and nothing in the middle. There'll be a separate ward totally. So, I mean, that would like confuse so many people. Yeah.
Since the provincial government's announcement that it was intending to rearrange the city ward boundaries within Toronto, school board trustees have no doubt been busy. And in fact, you yourself managed to reconvene with some of your colleagues at the Toronto Catholic District School Board for a meeting on August 8th. I'd like to know how that meeting went.
So that was the meeting that we had to decide on the boundaries. Otherwise, if we do not decide what boundaries were going to be in effect, then the province, if we didn't do it by, I believe the 14th was the
Right.
deadline, the province would have stepped in and they would have done everything by the 17th.
Okay.
So it was an urgent meeting, and I believe the Toronto District School Board did theirs the next day.
Okay. And so how did that meeting go for you and the other trustees?
Well, it's a bittersweet day for me because, like I said, when we had the city boundaries, I had lost an area that I grew up in at St. Clair and Dufferin. And now, because of the riding, I gained that back. However, I lost part of Weston that I grew very fond of. And it's going to hurt me emotionally because I was really attached with that community, and I think they're attached to me. They really like me there, and I feel kind of bad. Like I'll still help them if they call me, and I'm easily accessible. So
Right.
if they need me, they can call me, and I'll still help them out.
Tell me about some of the different options that were presented. How many of them were there to choose from?
We had 6 options, but three of those options were really because my boundaries were really firm, and like I said, I had over 50,000 just in one of my areas.
Right.
So my area pretty much didn't change in 3 areas, three of those options. However, I think it was 2 options where they did it by the schools. then I did have a little part of Parkdale High
Okay.
Park, I believe it was, and I'm not too familiar with that area.
It's never
there.
been under your jurisdiction before.
No, it's really south of me. Like I'm from the St. Clair and Dufferin area, and I'm even north of that up to Eglinton, Lawrence, and Wilson, and a lot of Weston as well, since it was part of the boundary. But mostly, I'm from Davenport.
Which option was ultimately selected by the board?
So the board opted to go with option 6, and
Was it a unanimous decision?
was unanimous decision, and they had the fewest red spots. I was reading these papers, and to the side they would have all the different quotients, and the different criterias for those quotients, and some of them, if they would use like the schools, proportion for schools, proportion for
The number of voters, for example.
number of voters, and Catholic support. There was probably about 8 options, and on there, some of them were all red. It was totally off. Like some trustees would only have 3,000 people to deal with, but they would be in charge of so many schools. So.
And then especially in comparison to other trustees, they would have perhaps more voters, whereas other trustees may not have enough voters in comparison. It was just out of
That's right,
balance is
yes.
what the red represents,
Yes,
right?
that's right.
Okay.
So the option 6 had the fewest red spots, but 4 or 5 would have been okay, fine by myself. But there was some ridings, I guess, that were just really off.
The Conservative government has sort of justified its decision to rearrange ward boundaries by saying that it'll save money, about $25 million. Do you think this will be the case?
You know what? They're still going to have a lot of staff. So they might save, I think it's probably this, they're talking about the salaries of the actual councillor.
They said that in total,
Over 4 years.
this change.
Okay, so I guess they're going to lose 22 councillors times.
Yes.
What did they make after 4 years each? Probably 600,000. So 22 times 600,000 is, if that reaches 25 million. However, the staff, they still need people to go out and, how do you connect with the community? So they're still going to be hiring a lot of staff. Where, if you ask me, I think where some of the cuts, and I think he will be doing them as well. He's going to do line by line, and he's going to see where there's money being spent or overly spent, and I have a feeling he's going to cut a lot of it. And wherever there's going to be some bleeding, hopefully he's smart enough to, put some of those positions back.
But ultimately, you think at the end of the day that this claim that it will save money will stand true?
There's always going to be a ripple effect somewhere. So hopefully it doesn't hurt the voters. They're the real boss.
And so going back to this option 6, and in your ward specifically, you currently represent Ward 6, that of York. And so what are some of the changes that you're going to have to deal with now with these new boundaries?
I lost a really nice, the smallest school, Santa Maria. And, I grew really attached to that school because, there's only 200 students in that school, and, it's one of the smaller ones, but they have the biggest heart. And they're just right outside. And we did so many things together. And I'm going to miss, being able to go visit there. I did lose 4 schools in Weston.
Okay.
So the boundary of Weston I lost. I inherited 7 schools south of Davenport, which is fine by me. I want to go and, visit them. Hopefully I get reelected, and I'll go and visit them. And, it takes me 4 hours to visit all my schools. I time myself.
Is that a good thing or is that a bad thing?
It's a good thing. I do it on a regular basis. I'll go in just to greet the principal, and because I visit the schools, I can see firsthand what some of the needs are. Like I'll go in there and I'll see things happening in real time as opposed to waiting to get a letter.
Right.
So it's nice to go and visit.
In terms of the technicalities, are you still operating under the title of York, and is it still considered Ward 6?
So I guess it's just going to be called by the riding name now. So it'll be called Davenport,
Okay.
St. Paul's.
Okay.
I think those are the terms that are going to be easily used.
Okay. And should constituents still look for number 6? Is it Ward 6?
Yes, mine's is Ward 6. There wasn't that many changes. I think the only change that happened was with Ward 4 and Ward 10.
Okay.
So, because for Ward 4 was up top, Ward 10 was lower, and I think what they did was they kind of twisted them around.
Okay. How many schools are you now responsible for? You mentioned having lost some and gained others. What's the total?
So I lost 4 schools. I inherit 7, and the reason I know is because I was looking at the numbers. I don't know all the schools yet. I'm still trying to digest the fact that I lost those schools that I was working really hard, attending all their events.
Right.
And now maybe I can still attend them if they invite me. And there's only 3 extra schools, 2, because I have 11. So now I have 13. So I inherit 2 extra on top.
Okay. In terms of the number of Catholic voters now, has that number increased for you? Has it decreased for you?
It has, I inherited the southern part. It definitely had to have decreased a little bit, but not significant. Because Davenport alone, like just the top part of Davenport Davenport in total had over 53,000 voters. So I used to have the northern part, but Weston as well has close to 50,000. So you couldn't put those 2 ridings together.
Taking into account the gains and the losses as a result of these changes in ward boundaries, for the most part, you're still in familiar territory.
Yes.
Is that safe to say? And so does that make you a little more comfortable heading into the elections in October?
Yes, definitely, because I lost, with the city boundaries, I had lost a huge chunk of, 2 of my schools that, were heavily populated, and that I just live down the street. I couldn't even vote for myself. So I'm like, what the heck? So I gained it back, which makes me happy about that. So I'm a little bit happier that I gained those areas that I had lost. But I did lose Weston area, like the furthest end, and I kind of feel for them.
Have any parents or any families reached out to you since these changes have been made?
You know what? A lot of the parents, they don't even know yet. Like we're in the know, but the parents, they're not going to know until probably after Election Day. When I guess December 1st, after Christmas, when the new trustees take over. So after the Christmas break, when they're going to have a new visitor coming to their Christmas concerts and stuff, and it'll be a trustee that they probably don't know, or hopefully, in my case, someone that they do know. I'm trying to remember. I don't think I had much other than, the consultations with trustees. I think that's about it. And if there was maybe 1 or 2 people contacted me, and they're probably just interested in becoming candidates, but I don't think it's actually a parent with children in our system. And you know what? That maybe it's because they're on summer break, right? So they don't really know much about it. Well, they're hearing stuff about the counselors on the news all the time, and a little bit about the Toronto District School Board. You don't really hear much about the Toronto Catholic in the news that much. So that's going to be.
But it's something you're certainly expecting, is that feedback from parents.
We will be having some surveys, I believe in September, and that's for the staff to get their data. Because there might be more changes in the future. I have no idea what they're going to do about that. But for me personally, I haven't had any, I don't know, I can't speak for the other trustees.
Right.
They may have received some calls as well, because there are a lot of active parents out there that, they've been doing things a certain way for so long, and now, they don't know, because they're getting a different trustee, they don't know what that trustee is going to be like. And really, I think the trustees, they're there to support the parents, for the most part. So if you're a parent, don't worry about it. I'm sure everything will be okay. The trustee's there to work with you, to help you out.
So ahead of the municipal election scheduled for October 22nd, for our viewers at home as well as constituents who may or may not be living within your ward, do you have a message for those watching?
Sure. I'm Frank D'Amico. I'm going to be running in Ward 6, and I hope I've been doing a good job, and I hope I can keep doing a good job for another 4 years. And I'm easily available. You can give me a call anytime, send me an email, and I will make sure I get back to you.
Thank you so much for speaking with us today, Frank. It was a pleasure having you here.
It's always nice coming to see you.
And so just as a final reminder for those at home, this year's municipal elections are scheduled for October 22nd, so please don't forget to go out and vote. My name is Jennifer Ferreira. This has been yet another Grande Entrevista. Thank you and have a good night.